that's holding them up. It's who?
11 cars, 23 drivers, one villain who cheated in every race and never won a single one. And somehow, across 17 episodes, Wacky Races became the top Saturday morning show of the 1968 to 69 season with a 52 share in the ratings. Here is the entire story of Wacky Races, 1968 in 11 minutes. How it got made. The origin of Wacky Races involves a fascinating collision of a Hollywood comedy film, a game show format that never quite materialized, and Hanna-Barbera's well-established instinct for turning cultural moments into Saturday morning programming. The 1965 film The Great Race, directed by Blake Edwards and starring Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis, was a broad slapstick comedy about a cross-country automobile race between a dashing hero and a twirling mustachioed villain. It was a big-budget comedy with elaborate production design, a love interest, and a clear structural premise. Good guy versus bad guy, racing, mayhem, comedy. Hanna-Barbera looked at that template and decided it could support a cartoon, with multiple racers competing simultaneously and a resident villain providing guaranteed sabotage in every episode. The show also drew inspiration from Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines, 1965, another broad slapstick comedy about competition between eccentric international participants. Between the two films, the thematic DNA of Wacky Races was essentially complete before a single cell was animated. Hanna-Barbera partnered on the production with Heater Quigley Inc., the game show production company behind the Hollywood Squares, because the original concept included a live-action game show element. The plan was that child contestants would bet on which car they thought would win each race, with prizes awarded based on correct predictions. CBS rejected the game show component before the show aired, but Heater Quigley remained listed in the end credits of every episode despite contributing nothing to the final product. The production copyright still reads copyright 1968 by Hanna-Barbera Productions, which tells you everything you need to know
The Wacky Racers are off again, in more ways than one.
about how integral the Heater Quigley involvement actually was. Writer Mike Maltese, who had written virtually all of the classic Chuck Jones Roadrunner cartoons for Warner Brothers, joined the writing staff of Wacky Races. His fingerprints are visible in nearly every episode. The physics-defying gags, the painted scenery that characters can run into, the fake railroad tracks that suddenly produce real trains, the elaborate traps that backfire in geometrically escalating ways. Maltese understood better than almost anyone alive how to structure a cartoon around a villain who is always foiled by his own cleverness, and he brought that understanding directly to Dick Dastardly. The shift from superhero adventure cartoons to comedy racing was not accidental. Hanna-Barbera's superhero cycle of the late 1960s,
Gangway!
which had included characters like Birdman, Space Ghost, and the Herculoids, was losing ratings and drawing complaints from parent groups concerned about animated violence. Wacky Races represented a deliberate pivot back towards slapstick comedy, the mode in which Hanna-Barbera had built its earliest successes with the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and Yogi Bear. The show marked what the Hanna-Barbera Wiki describes as the end of HB's superhero adventure cycle and a return to slapstick comedy, and the rating suggested the audience was ready for exactly that return. Wacky Races first aired on CBS on September 14, 1968. It ran until January 4, 1969. 17 episodes, each containing 2 separate 11-minute races.
We call that a low-down Yankee carpetbagger trick.
for a total of 34 races across the season. The show was an immediate ratings success, and the characters who appeared in it became some of the most recognizable in Hanna-Barbera's entire history. The cars and drivers. Before getting into the mechanics of how the show worked, you need to meet the competitors. There are 11 of them, and each one is a distinct comedic archetype built around a specific thematic vehicle. Car number 1, the Bouldermobile, driven by the Slag brothers, Rock and Gravel. These are cavemen, and their car is accordingly made of stone. When it falls apart, which it does frequently, they rebuild it by hammering any nearby boulder with their clubs. They communicate largely in caveman grunts, though occasional intelligible words escape. They are not sophisticated, but they are persistent. Car number 2, the Creepy Coupe, driven by the Gruesome Twosome, Big Gruesome, and Little Gruesome. Monster-themed in the Gothic tradition, their car contains a dragon in its belfry that occasionally serves as propulsion. They are affectionately menacing in the way that 1960s Saturday morning monsters tended to be, spooky but not genuinely threatening. Car number 3, the Convert-A-Car, driven by Professor Pat Pending. The professor is an inventor, and his car reflects that. It can transform into any number of different vehicles and configurations as circumstances demand. Pat Pending is essentially the show's wild card, capable of innovation that no other car can match, which is why he occasionally wins races despite rarely being the front runner. Car number 4, the Crimson Habeler, driven by the Red Max, a biplane automobile hybrid, part World War I flying machine, and part ground vehicle, piloted by a character who is unmistakably inspired by the Red Baron archetype. The Red Max is dashing, Germanic in flavor, and occasionally airborne when the plot requires it. Car number 5, the Compact Pussycat, driven by Penelope Pitstop. Penelope was the only female driver in the Wacky races, and she was added to the lineup on the recommendation of Joseph Barbera, who felt the all-male cast needed balance. She was designed by Iwao Takamoto and Jerry Eisenberg. The Compact Pussycat is styled as a mobile beauty salon, complete with automatic grooming tools that occasionally backfire on other racers. Penelope is voiced by Janet Waldo,
Sorry, boys, but it's every little old gal for her sire.
who brought a cheerful Southern accented charm to the character. She won enough races to establish herself as a genuine competitor rather than just a novelty, and she was popular enough to receive her own spin-off series the following year. Car number 6, the Army Surplus Special, driven by Sergeant Blast and Private Meekley. Military-themed, part tank and part jeep, complete with a functional turret cannon. Sergeant Blast is the commanding personality. Private Meekley is the long-suffering subordinate. The car is known as the Surplus 6, which is a better name than anything a modern marketing team would probably come up with. Car number 7, the Bulletproof Bomb, driven by the Anthill Mob, a gang of small-statured gangsters who go by names like Ring-a-Ding and Clyde.
And now it's car number 7 in the lead, but here comes Peter Perfect in car number 9.
Their car is a vintage 1920s-style automobile of the sort associated with Prohibition-era crime, and they operate with the cheerful criminality of a cartoon gang who are more interested in keeping ahead of police than in winning races. They also became supporting characters in The Perils of Penelope Pitstop, where they served as Penelope's unlikely protectors. Car number 8, the Arkansas Chugabug, driven by Luke and Blubber Bear, a hillbilly log cabin on wheels, driven by a southern frontiersman and his large anthropomorphic bear companion. The Arkansas Chugabug is not fast, but it is distinctive, and Luke and Blubber Bear represent the rural Americana archetype that Hanna-Barbera had mined in various forms since the early days of Huckleberry Hound.
Your wagon.
Car number 9, the Turbo Terrific, driven by Peter Perfect. Peter is the show's dashing hero archetype. Handsome, charming, confident, and technically proficient. His car is a long-nosed, sleek racing machine that should, by rights, win every race on pure engineering merit. That it doesn't always do so is a testament to the show's commitment to keeping the competition genuinely unpredictable. Peter Perfect is the character most openly infatuated with Penelope Pitstop, a running subplot that generates consistent comedy without ever being resolved within the show's single season. Car number 10, the Buzzwagon, driven by Rufus Roughcut and his co-pilot Sawtooth, who is a large, industrious beaver. The Buzzwagon is a log cabin on circular saw blade wheels, which is both impractical and somehow brilliant.
Is it cold, Rufus?
You betcha! My hot rod just turned into a cold.
Rufus is a lumberjack type. Sawtooth's primary function is to use his enormous teeth when the saw blade wheels need supplementation. It is exactly as peculiar as it sounds, and it works perfectly within the show's internal logic. Car number 00, the Mean Machine, driven by Dick Dastardly and his dog Mutley. The Mean Machine is purple, rocket-powered, bristling with concealed weapons, and capable of flight. It is almost certainly the fastest car in the race when it is running properly. The key phrase is, when it is running properly, because the Mean Machine has the structural integrity of most elaborate plans. Impressive until it doesn't work, and then catastrophically not working. Dick Dastardly and Mutley.
Zero into hydrofoil drives and is skinning down the Mississippi toward the finish line.
The show has a nominal ensemble cast and a genuine protagonist in the form of the races themselves. But it has one undeniable star in Dick Dastardly and one undeniable scene stealer in Mutley. Dick Dastardly is one of the great cartoon villains, not because he is menacing or powerful, but because his failure is so consistent and so complete that it becomes its own kind of spectacle. Paul Winchell voiced him with a high-energy, theatrical malevolence that never tipped into actual menace. Dastardly's evil is performative, almost self-consciously theatrical, in the tradition of Victorian melodrama villains. The twirling mustache is literal, the scheming is constant, the results are uniformly catastrophic for himself. The central joke of Wacky races is one of the purest comedic premises in animation history.
Pretty slick, eh?
Dastardly's Mean Machine is fast enough to win every race legitimately. He doesn't need to cheat, but he can't help himself. He races ahead of the other competitors, then stops to set an elaborate trap, a painted tunnel in a cliff face that only he somehow passes through, a fake lake, a giant magnet, a disguise, a fake road sign, and the trap either doesn't work or backfires in a way that puts him in last place. Then the other racers pass him. Then the race ends without him. In 34 races across the series, Dick Dastardly never won once. Not even close. He never finished in the top 3. This is not presented as tragedy. It is presented as the natural consequence of someone who prioritizes the performance of villainy over the achievement of any actual goal.
Last and lead, Dick Dastardly.
Mutley was voiced by Don Messick, one of the most prolific voice actors in Hanna-Barbera's history, using a wheezily distinctive snicker that became one of the most imitated sounds in Saturday morning cartoon history. Mutley doesn't speak in conventional sentences. He growls, he mutters, he snickers, and he occasionally delivers audible asides that the audience can hear, but Dastardly apparently cannot. His relationship with Dastardly is the relationship of a long-suffering subordinate to a boss who is more confident than competent, a dynamic that is funny because it is entirely recognizable. Mutley's snicker became so associated with Hanna-Barbera that Don Messick used variations of it across multiple other characters for years.
And see who's shooting at us, Mutley.
a character named Mumbly, clearly Mutley adjacent, starred in his own 1976 series. The basic Mutley design and vocal approach became a template the studio returned to repeatedly. The phrase, "drat and double drat," Dastardly's signature expression of exasperation, entered common usage among the generation that grew up watching the show. It is one of those cartoon coinages that doesn't seem like it should have outlasted its moment and yet has persisted in cultural memory with remarkable tenacity. People who haven't watched Wacky races in 50 years still use drat with a specifically dastardly inflected intonation and know exactly where it comes from. How the episodes worked. Each of the 17 episodes contained 2 separate races, making 34 total.
Cut in the Arkansas Chugga-Bugger coming up fast.
Rat! Another one of your stupid ideas that...
The races took place across North America, Arkansas, Wyoming, Missouri, Rhode Island, Arizona, Pennsylvania, California, and numerous other locations, real and fictional. Though the geography was treated as a backdrop for comedy rather than a realistic setting. The structure of each race was consistent. All 11 cars take off. Dastardly races to the front, sets a trap, the trap fails, the other cars pass him, someone other than Dastardly wins. Within that reliable framework, the specific permutations of each episode were inventive enough to sustain interest across the full season. The environments changed, the traps changed, the winners changed. Different cars won different races, which maintained the fiction that the competition was genuinely open,
Peter Perfect, as the anthill mob takes the lead away from him.
even when the most predictable element, Dastardly's failure, was locked in. The race winners across the series were distributed across multiple cars, though Penelope Pitstop, Peter Perfect, the Gruesome Twosome, and Professor Pat Pending tended to win more often than others. The Red Max, the Anthill Mob, and Rufus Roughcut and Sawtooth also took checkered flags. The Arkansas Chugabug won at least once. The Bouldermobile won at least once. Dick Dastardly's tally, 0. The narrator, voiced by Dave Willock, provided play-by-play commentary throughout each race and could interact directly with the drivers, who would turn to address him as if aware of the camera. This fourth wall awareness was a deliberate comedic device, and it gave the show a playful meta quality that was slightly unusual for Saturday morning programming.
Get that tin can back into the war game, Sergeant, and be quick about it.
The episode titles give a useful sense of the geographic variety: Seesaw to Arkansas, YOY Wyoming, Mishmash Missouri Dash, Baja Ha Ha Race, Rhode Island Road Race, the Carlsbad or Bus Bash, Ballpoint, Pennsylvania, or Bust. A running theme of punning on actual American place names that gave the show a faintly educational quality it was probably not trying to cultivate. Children watching in 1968 learned the rough locations of Arkansas, Wyoming, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania from Wacky races in the same way that subsequent generations learned geography from where in the world is Carmen Sandiego.
And the wacky beat goes on as popular Peter Perfect makes a play for pretty Penelope Pitstop.
Incidentally, as a byproduct of entertainment. The show's opening sequence established the tone perfectly. All 11 cars line up at the start. Dastardly attempts a pre-race trick, chaining all the other cars to a pole. He accidentally shifts into reverse, bumps into the pole, breaks it, and frees everyone. The race begins. Dastardly is already losing. The voice cast. The full voice cast for Wacky Races was 6 performers handling the entire ensemble of characters across all 11 cars plus the narrator. Dawes Butler, the voice of Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Elroy Jetson, and many other Hanna-Barbera leads, voiced Peter Perfect, Sergeant Blast, Big Gruesome, Rock Slag, Rufus Roughcut, and the Red Max.
Sure slipped him good.
The range required to distinguish those 6 characters from each other is considerable, and Butler managed it with the specificity that made him one of the most indispensable voice actors of the era. Don Messick, Scooby-Doo, Bam Bam Rubble, and many others voiced Mutley, Little Gruesome, Gravel Slag, Professor Pat Pending, Sawtooth, and Ring-a-Ding. Again, 6 characters of entirely different types, each requiring a distinct sound. Paul Winchell handled Dick Dastardly. Janet Waldo voiced Penelope Pitstop. John Stevenson provided additional character voices. Dave Willick narrated. The music was composed by Hoyt Curtin, who served as Hanna-Barbera's music director for decades, and whose themes were a defining sound of Saturday morning television. The Wacky Races theme is exactly what you expect from the era.
The most daredevil group of daffy drivers to ever whirl their wheels in the Wacky Races.
Upbeat, propulsive, immediately recognizable as belonging to a specific time in animation history. 6 performers voicing 23 characters across a season of racing is an extraordinary feat of vocal range and consistency. The workload each actor carried was significant. Butler and Messick in particular were essentially providing the voice architecture of the entire ensemble, shifting between characters within episodes as scenes required. The fact that each of their characters sounds distinct rather than like the same voice doing different accents is a testament to the craft that Hanna-Barbera's core voice artists brought to work that was produced quickly and under real budget pressure. Saturday morning animation in 1968 was not a prestige medium. It was a commercial product made efficiently. The performances that have held up across 6 decades were not accidental. They were the result of genuinely skilled performers making deliberate choices about who each character was. The spin-offs. The success of Wacky Races generated 2 spin-offs that launched in 1969, the year after the original run. Dastardly and Mutley and their flying machines, also sometimes called Stop the Pigeon, sent Dick Dastardly and Mutley into World War I-era skies, tasked with stopping a carrier pigeon from delivering messages to the Allied side. They failed, every episode, with exactly the same consistency they had demonstrated in Wacky Races. The show ran for 1 season of 17 episodes. The dynamic was the same, the setting was new, and the Vulture Squadron, Dastardly and Mutley's incompetent crew,
With these balloon tires, I can fly along this desert.
added additional characters for Mutley to suffer alongside. The perils of Penelope Pitstop moved Penelope from the racing circuit to a serialized adventure format inspired by silent film cliffhanger serials. Each episode put Penelope in a new peril courtesy of the villain the Hooded Claw, voiced by Paul Winchell, doing a more sinister variation of the same theatrical villainy he'd brought to Dastardly, while the Anthill Mob, reprised from Wacky Races, served as her comedy relief protectors. The show ran for 1 season of 17 episodes and gave Janet Waldo's Penelope considerably more screen time and character development than the racing format had allowed.
As the Wacky Racers near Bedrock Canyon, Red Max overtakes the converter car.
Both spin-offs were widely syndicated through the 1970s and 1980s, which meant that generations of children who missed the original 1968 CBS broadcast still encountered Dastardly, Mutley, and Penelope through afternoon and Saturday morning reruns. The syndication runs of both Dastardly and Mutley in their flying machines, and The Perils of Penelope Pitstop kept those characters in active circulation for more than a decade after their original episodes had aired, contributing to the outsized cultural footprint of characters who technically appeared in only 17 first-run episodes each. By the time a child of the mid-1970s encountered them, these were established, familiar presences, which is the particular alchemy that syndication performed on Saturday morning animation of this era.
Oh, Private, how do you stop this
The Legacy. The original Wacky Races series ran for 1 season, 17 episodes, 34 races, 0 wins for Dick Dastardly. And yet the show's cultural footprint is considerably larger than 17 episodes would normally produce. The characters have appeared in or been referenced by an extraordinary range of subsequent media. Dick Dastardly and Mutley appeared in Laugh Olympics in 1977, with analogs named the Dread Baron and Mumbly leading the Really Rottens team against Yogi Bears and Scooby-Doo's teams. The 1990 syndicated series Wake, Rattle, and Roll featured a segment called Fender Bender 500 in which Dastardly and Mutley raced against other classic Hanna-Barbera characters using a reworked mean machine called the Dirty Truckster. In Fender Bender 500, Dastardly actually won some races, a significant departure from his Wacky Races record that the show treated as a notable development. DC Comics ran a dark reimagining called Wacky Raceland in 2016, 6 issues placing the characters in a post-apocalyptic Mad Max setting, which is the kind of adult-oriented genre recasting that became fashionable in the 2000s for properties that existed primarily as nostalgia. A full reboot of Wacky Races launched on Boomerang's streaming service in 2017, with an updated visual style and modernized character interpretations, airing on the Boomerang television channels internationally in the following year. Dick Dastardly and Mutley appeared in the 2020 animated film Scoob.
Banned?
There you are.
Reimagined in a new visual style, but with the same essential character dynamic intact. References to Wacky Races appear in The Simpsons, Family Guy, The Goldbergs, Malcolm in the Middle, and numerous other productions over the decades, shorthand for a specific kind of 1960s Saturday morning cartoon absurdity that the culture recognized instantly. The show was the #1 Saturday morning program of the 1968 to 69 season. That's a fact that gets lost in the narrative of Wacky Races as a cult classic, rather than a mainstream hit. It was both, at different points in its life. It was first a rating success, then a rerun fixture, then a nostalgia property, then a subject of deliberate rebooting and reinvention. The progression from contemporary hit to beloved relic is one that many Saturday morning shows of the era followed.
It says, danger, landslide, take Route 66.
But Wacky Races followed it with particular thoroughness. What kept it alive across all those forms and all those decades was the fundamental elegance of its central joke, a villain so compulsively committed to cheating that he fails to achieve the thing. Cheating was supposed to get him. It is a joke that does not require translation, does not date, and does not need a new context to remain funny. Dick Dastardly is still racing ahead of everyone else and setting traps for himself, 6 decades on. The other racers are still passing him. The checkered flag is still waving for someone else. The show's influence on subsequent animation extended beyond direct revivals. Captain Caveman, who debuted in 1977, bears obvious visual and conceptual resemblance to the Slag Brothers.
I know I'm small. It's a pituitary thing.
The ensemble racing format returned in Yogi's Space Race in 1978 and in various other Hanna-Barbera productions that needed a competitive framework with a large cast. The structural idea, multiple eccentric characters competing within a fixed format with a reliable villain providing guaranteed conflict, proved adaptable to almost any setting. Mike Maltese's contribution also deserves individual recognition, because the Roadrunner DNA he brought to the show is what makes Dastardly's failure comedy rather than pathos. The Roadrunner cartoons work because while Ai Coyote's schemes are elaborate, specific, and self-defeating in ways that feel inevitable only in retrospect,
Don't just sit there, Mutley. Start putting the car back together.
Every trap Dastardly sets has that same quality. You believe it might work right up until it definitively, catastrophically doesn't. The specific pleasure of watching a well-constructed slapstick failure, the setup, the moment of apparent success, the reversal, was something Maltese understood structurally in a way that very few writers did. 17 episodes, 1 season, 34 races, and 34 dastardly failures, and a cast of 11 cars that managed to feel like a fully populated world in spite of a format that gave most of them only a minute or two of actual screen time per episode. Wacky Races worked because the joke was simple, the characters were distinct, the gags were inventive, and someone, specifically someone named Mike Maltese, who had spent a decade doing the same thing for Roadrunner cartoons, understood exactly how to make a villain's failure funny rather than depressing. If this brought back a Saturday morning memory you'd half forgotten, hit the like button and subscribe. We cover the shows, the studios, and the moments that built what Saturday morning television was. More coming. See you in the next one.